Hey guys, and welcome to Full Armour Radio. I'm John O'Rourke, your host. In this episode, we'll be introducing a new subcategory of episodes called Evangelism Encounters. Evangelism Encounters will be audio taken from conversations I've had with people while doing evangelism. So you, the listener, get to sit in on conversations that I have with non-Christians and see how we debate the issues, see how we debate the Christian worldview versus their worldview. In this series, we'll be talking to atheists and agnostics and Jehovah's Witnesses and even people who believe in Viking gods like Thor and Odin. There's all sorts of different types of people out there, and it's important for us to understand how can we interact with all types of unbelievers. How can Christians share the gospel with people of all different worldviews? That's what I'm hoping that the Christian will get out of this podcast. And if you're not a Christian, if you hold to one of the worldviews that you hear in this series, I hope that your worldview is challenged and it gives you something to think about. If you have any questions for me, please contact us via the contact form on the podcast website. Now, before I get into the content for today's episode, I wanted to talk about the sponsors for today. We at Full Armour Radio are part of the CR101 Radio Network, which is a Christian Reconstruction internet radio station that hosts and broadcasts lectures, sermons, and podcasts 24/7. You can learn more at cr101radio.com. We're also brought to you by Grace Community School's apprenticeship program, which is dedicated to the training of the next generation of Christian teachers so they can own and operate successful and profitable Christian schools. You can learn more at gcsapprenticeship.com. So in this episode of Evangelism Encounters, we'll be sitting in on a conversation I had with a philosophy major at a local university. I found this conversation to be extremely helpful and a good example of having a good conversation with an atheist. It was calm and considerate, but also arguments were presented on both sides, and I feel like it's a good illustration of how to have a good and cordial conversation with an atheist. And I hope that you'll consider the arguments given here if you are not a Christian and really consider them and think about the gospel that's presented as well. And to the Christians listening, I hope that you're encouraged by this conversation and that you'll go out and share the gospel with those around you as well. And if you have any concerns about sharing the gospel with people, or especially how to answer objections from atheists, I hope this conversation serves as a good template to help you out with that. So let's begin sitting in on this conversation with an atheist. I hope you enjoy. Question. The question is, what do you think will happen to you after you die?
So is it like a spiritual concept or just... Okay. So I probably will have not the particular response I'll get in this area. I don't really have any religious aspect of my life. Okay. So personally, I don't... Like, I like to think that maybe, when we die that, there's something else after there for us. Like, I personally believe, though, that it's just kind of a cycle where when we die, our body will just kind of dissolve back into the ground and just nutrients go back into the earth, and that's it. I think that's just what happens. Okay. Like, not much else to it other than that.
Okay. Do you think that there is a spiritual element to humans?
I think a lot of people confuse saying spirituality with just, religiosity. And, I definitely, I think there is kind of a spiritual connection just between people and just, the earth. And definitely, I think there's kind of just this innate, kind of unspoken factor there. But if it's because of a higher power, I don't think so. Honestly, I know a lot of people say they've been given, evidence and pieces of, just, signs of, their faith. And, I kind of just see those things logically as, that would happen because of this series of events.
Okay. So do you believe in the existence of God, or no?
No, I don't think I do. Just, I don't like to say, I probably will say I'm probably too scientific.
Okay. So what brought you to the conclusion that no God exists?
So it's kind of more just experiences. I grew up in East Texas, which is really, really heavy Christian and Baptist, and just the way I was raised, I kind of believe there's just a very natural physical process to the way that humans developed and the way the earth was formed, and like, while, you know, it's a really nice, comforting thought to think that there's, you know, this higher being and this God that, like, formed everything, like, I kind of take comfort in the fact that there's, like, hundreds of millions of years behind all of this. Like, I think it didn't just, like, happen immediately. Like, it just, it all has a due process.
Gotcha. So where do you think, because I didn't totally understand, like, where do you think that everything came from originally? Like, the origins of all things?
So, like, obviously, like, you know, planets kind of just form when, you know, lots of little clumps in space get together, and then, you know, after 100 million years, you know, there's a little bit of water, some organic material forms an atmosphere, and then after that, you know, cells start to do what they do, and like, after, you know, a couple 100 million more years, you just get some basic life forms, and, like, I definitely am probably a strong believer of evolution, just because I think our fossil records and just, like, pieces of evidence of just human evolution, like, not saying that we evolved from chimps, but just a common ancestor, like, definitely, like, there's just a very step-by-step process there.
Okay. Just to get back to the very, very origins, I understand all that from following, but you said something about clumps in space coming together.
Yeah, so, I mean...
Let's talk about the origins of that, I guess, as well, even earlier.
Well, and I guess that's kind of one of those things that's, like, frustrating for humans, and I guess that's kind of, like, I definitely understand, you know, just kind of the piece that comes to saying, well, you know, that came from God, like, he formed that, and, you know, I guess to a certain degree, I can't say for certainty, because, like, how could I possibly know? Like, I obviously haven't committed any time to being spiritual. Sure. And I'm not, like, super against it. Like, I think it's a beautiful thing that people can have that in their life, but it's not for me. But for, like, little clumps of rocks in space coming together, I think it's just, I don't know, I think it's kind of, and I say this in the best way possible, I think it's kind of conceited of humans to think that it's all just for them, because, like, there's this huge universe, and, like, we are literally just one little speck in all of it. So, like, I don't know. It's kind of an interesting concept that, you know, how did the whole thing start? And obviously, like, I don't have an opinion on it, just because, like, who knows? Like,
where did things come from? Yeah. And your like, your worldview, the way that you view things. Like,
and I think it's just, you know, obviously, I don't know, probably more just, I don't know. It's kind of, I never really, like, put much thought into, like, how did, you know, outer space form.
Yeah.
But, I don't know. That's kind of a good question.
Yeah, I mean...
I would look at it, honestly, the same way that, you know, basic life formed. It's just, it all starts from one very small speck. But how did that got there?
Right, that's the question.
Who knows how that got there?
Right.
I don't know.
Because, I mean, some people have said that it came from nothing. But when you think about that, it doesn't really work, does it?
No.
Because nothing can't create everything.
Yeah, no, you have to have an exchange of, you know, some substance.
Yeah, nothing is nothing. It's not something.
Yeah,
you know,
you have to have something to destroy something. And, like, that's so far as to say that, you know, it could be something as small as two atoms colliding, and it's still, people will ask you, well, where did those atoms come from?
Right. Reasonably.
So, who knows? But, I don't know. That's a good question.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty important, you know, in terms of the origins of everything. You gotta have a start.
And I guess, like, in terms of, like, you know, like, I personally kind of, like, I don't think, like, it is an important question, you know, but, like, for me, it's not, like, an important aspect of my life.
Sure.
Like, because obviously, like, I have to be grateful. I'm like, oh, well, you know what, I get to be alive here for the amount of time that I get to be, so that's fun, but...
That's fun, yeah.
No, but the big origins, like, and, you know, there are lots of different theories, and I guess to that aspect, I don't know, it would make a lot of sense, you know, that I don't know, it's an easy way, okay, it's not easy, but it's a convenient way to say that there's something that could have just formed everything. Like, I think that's a very easy way to go to, and, like, especially since we have such, oh god, there was about to be a wasp on you. Since there is such, like, I don't know, so much unknown that we don't know about the universe. It's like the ocean. We don't know what's down.
Right.
Yeah, like, who knows what's at the bottom of the ocean.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Like, I think until we kind of can understand that better, like, I don't think we could actually form any definitive, like,
Yeah, you're right there. There's so much that we don't know
Yeah,
about
and-
our planet.
And in the grand scheme of things, like, humans haven't been around for very long.
That's true, too.
Like, I saw this cool analogy, and it was like, if you look at, like, the timeline of Earth on a clock, humans arrived at about 11:59,
Okay.
and that's how long we've been here. So, like, for us to be able to understand, all the big inner workings of the universe, like, it's not going to just happen. Like, if, hopefully we don't die out by 2050, like everyone's predicting, but, if humans can actually keep going for a couple more millennia, like, I bet we could figure it out, but at this point in time, like, we just don't have the ability to.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll keep learning things and such. Well, I like talking to you.
Oh, yeah, thanks.
I think that you're a good thinker.
It's an interesting topic because, like I told you, I grew up in East Texas. I was not raised with any religion.
Yeah.
My parents didn't use it at all, and I was cool with that. And then, like, people were super, like, toxically Christian, and, like, that's a weird way to phrase it, but, like, being ostracized from, like, school events and, like, sports teams just because you don't, like, go to the church they do is, like, it's a really off-putting experience. It's like, I've come to a place where I'm, like, not super bitter about religion, and I think it's a really nice thing,
Yeah.
Like, I personally, there's a lot of things in my life that I probably would like to find peace with, like, through something like that, but for me, I can't justify just putting blind faith in something. Like, I need to have, like, a solid, concrete reason to believe in something.
Yeah, no, and I like I said, I like talking to you. I think you're intelligent.
Oh, thank you.
Just from the few minutes of talking to you. I think that you're pleasant to talk to, too.
Okay.
You're nice. But yeah, I think we should talk about that. I'd like to talk about worldviews and stuff, because I know that we're actually coming from different places in terms of worldview. Because I actually am coming from a Christian worldview perspective, but I'm not, like I said, I'm not going to.
No, and that's fine. Like,
Yeah.
Obviously, like, I recognize, especially living in the South, like, you can't just avoid,
Right.
Faith and religion, like.
True. I mean, I'm not actually from the South. You may be able to tell from the way I talk.
I know, I can't tell at all. Like, you can tell I'm from Wyoming.
Yeah.
But,
I'm
like,
from Pennsylvania, actually.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
So, like, and it's especially, like, it's not as noticeable up north because, like, I feel like, well, especially the north I was from, like, there was, like, 3 churches on each corner of the town.
Yeah.
And, like, it wasn't a big thing in town, but, like, I feel like you kind of have to, I don't know, I think it comes from just, like, a basic level of human respect for other people.
No, sure. I think that we should be dialogue. There's dialogue. That's why when I talk to you about.
And I don't mind talking about it. Like, it's honestly enjoyable. Like, I
Yeah,
enjoy
no.
hearing, like, and you know what? Like, I tell people, I'm like, you know what? I haven't gotten any good evidence yet, but if you can give me good evidence, like,
Okay.
maybe I'll think about it. But
Okay. Well, let's talk about a few things. So we both live in the same world, of course. And we view the world. We have different worldviews. They're kind of like glasses that we wear. If I wear glasses that are red tinted, everything I see is going to be a hint of red, even though all things aren't actually red. That's the way I'd see it. And the same thing would go for you if you're wearing blue tinted glasses. So we're all viewing the same world, but we're coming to different conclusions. Okay, and the reason for that is because evidence doesn't speak for itself.
yeah.
And that's what people say sometimes, but that's not true. Evidence does not speak for itself.
No, you have to actually, like, you have to analyze
Interpret
it.
it, yeah, and look at it, and that's interpreted through your worldview lens, so to speak. So what really needs to be done is talk about which worldviews are rational and which ones are irrational.
That's an excellent point.
Yeah.
And that's actually, like, and when I say argument, I don't mean, like, we're going to sit here and
No,
fight
I
each
get
other.
it. No,
but,
logically,
it's able to have a constructive path of thought where two people can exchange different ideas. And I do think that that's a really common argument is, like, it's unpopular, but I genuinely think that, having a faith-based system, I think it's very irrational because just, to put blind faith in something, like, that's basically, not taking any evidence. Like, you're not putting any, it's, I don't know, I don't want to say it's the cop-out, but, like, to me, it's, like, it's a very easy way to justify things that you do in your life.
Sure.
To make decisions. And, like, to some degree, I feel like for lots of people, it takes away a lot of accountability.
Okay.
And because, people will do something and they say, oh, well, that was just God's plan that happened. Well, no, if there's a God's plan, I really hope that it wasn't his plan for you to go, like, hit a child with your car. That would be a really horrible plan. Like, for things like that to happen. And I think, like, instead of, like, actively, like, kind of pathing out, why something happened, like, you can still believe that, maybe this is what God wanted, but instead of just, like, oh, it's just It's just the way it's supposed to be. Like, it's just, I think
That's
it's
fatalism.
It is.
Yeah, and that's not.
And it's not everyone's like that.
Yeah.
I recognize, but like, I think more often than not, than from what I've experienced, and I can't speak for every single person on earth.
Sure. Yeah.
But just from my experience with people kind of who've been very deeply faithful, there's a certain level of just, it's a weird way to phrase it, and I had a really good argument at one point, and I can't really remember it, but it's, for the choices they make in life, I feel like it's almost as if, you know, they're making those decisions because that's what they believe would be, you know, best for God, and, you know, to a certain, like, and that's fine, it's cool, but, like, I personally, like, I think, you know, people can, like, I think innately will have morals, and, like, there's things that, like, characteristics that humans just kind of innately are, and for them to just kind of disregard that instead of, like, kind of analyzing what would be, you know, good for them, good for people around them, morally good, sound, like, I feel like it's just kind of a lazy way to approach life.
Okay. So here are the things that need to be accounted for in a worldview. So a worldview, if a worldview is true, it has to be, of course, consistent with reality, right?
Yeah.
And it has to be self-sufficient. What I mean is that it can't try to prop up its own worldview by grabbing things from other worldviews.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because that would demonstrate that those worldviews are true.
Yeah.
So if we're saying, oh, this worldview is true, it has to be able to account for things by itself, not grabbing from other worldviews. So one of the things it needs to account for is what you just mentioned, is this universal morality, this universal moral absolutes that exists in the world.
Yeah.
Right? So you and I agree, I imagine, that it would be wrong. You just give an example, slapping a child, something like that, or murdering somebody. If somebody came in here...
Yeah, like, that's definitely wrong.
Yeah. Shooting up, you know, people here would be immoral. So the question is, so from a worldview that's non-Christian theist, like your own worldview, what is the standard, or what is the basis by which you can judge whether something is right or wrong?
Like, what, I guess, my question to that, like, for that foundation, is it just kind of like what I believe, or is it like rules that I've gotten from like other things, like kind of like...
Well, how from a worldview that's atheistic, the question is, like, why is it wrong, for example, to murder?
Yeah, okay. I don't know, to a certain, like, okay, I kind of believe, it's kind of a weird standpoint, because I do believe that humans are very connected with each other, and I think, you know, being very emotional beings, it's, it would be very hard not to have a connection with the people you meet, like, especially just like you walk in, like, hey, let's have an interview. I'm like, okay, great, there's a connection right there. Yeah. But, you know, for that sense of morality, it's kind of also one of those things where, you know, you can be brought up in a really hostile environment and you don't develop those morals. And I think it's purely, you know, people are the product of their environments and their genes and their family, what they inherit. And, you know, by that degree, like, their parents and grandparents, it's all just a very good, it's a trickle-down effect. But, like, where those morals come from, it's kind of, you know, there's always that big question, is, like, are humans innately good? Can they be just, like, innately bad? And I think, I think we're just kind of a blank slate, that, like, what we experience in life, that's kind of what forms them. And, like, you know, there could be someone who grows up and nobody ever talks about, oh, let's see, like, I don't know, I don't want to say killing someone, because that's obviously really bad. But, like, they grow up believing that, like, wearing, you know, like, denim, they're like, that's the worst thing you could ever do.
Okay.
That's just, like, that's horrible. Like, you are a terrible person if you wear denim. Like, different reasons, whatever.
Sure.
And, like, obviously, no one cares. You're not, like, you're not making a moral choice by what you wear in the morning. But if, you know, they get taught that, that's what they'll believe.
Right. Let me rephrase my question, because that's not exactly what I was asking. I understand what you're saying, is that you're saying why people have certain, like, ideas about what's right and wrong.
Yeah.
I'm asking, why is it wrong?
Why is it wrong?
From an, like, what's the problem with it?
Okay, so, like, what's the standard?
Yeah.
Okay. Give me a second. I don't know, because, so this is kind of an interesting place. So, I don't like to be like, oh, well, I'm super different and unique, but I do think that, you know, religion, I think faith, I think it's very important for just, you know, the aspect that if it keeps people kind and if it keeps people good, I think that's a really good thing, and I think it's very valuable. And, you know, there's, you know, I don't know, it's kind of a tough question, I think.
Yeah, because that's really the question. What you just said is really my question, is that why is it that, like, from your worldview, does it matter if you're kind to people?
Yeah.
For example.
Okay, so that's, and that kind of ties back to, like, it matters to me to be kind to people because, that's just how I want to be treated.
Okay.
It's, honestly, to a certain degree, it's completely self-interested because I will have a better life.
Okay.
If, the people around me are kind and wholesome.
Even that, though, of course.
Yeah, like,
is
even
assuming,
to that, like, you have to assume
standard.
that's right. Like, you have to wonder, like, where that comes from.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess it's just kind of... I don't know. Because it's, to that same degree, you could ask the question, like, why is it bad that, people go and enslave other people? Like, why is that bad?
Mm-hmm.
It's that same kind of question. Like,
Yeah.
you can say, well, why would you go and why would you go do that to another person? Like, well, okay, why is it bad?
Right, that's my question.
And it's kind of like that kind of, like, I was sort of like, because it is, duh.
Right.
Like, and that's just what people want to say, because, like, it's kind of one of those, like, on the top layer, it's kind of like, people are like, oh, that's kind of a dumb question, obviously, because obviously it's really bad to do that, or it's obviously a good thing to go do these things, but it's, like, kind of deeper, like, than that, where you have to, like, question, like, okay, well, why? Like, not my experiences,
Yeah.
but, like, why is, like, in general, do the main population of people believe that?
Yeah,
And
see, I knew I liked you. You're a good thinker. This is exactly, because you just nailed it on the head. Most people say, well, it's wrong because it's wrong.
Yeah.
Which is not really answering the question.
No, they're like, you're just saying, you're just agreeing with them.
Right, you're just saying, well, I just know it is, which is,
Yeah.
you know what the word arbitrary means?
Yeah.
You haven't given a reason. It's just kind of
It's just
an irrational approach to it.
Yeah.
Saying, oh, it's just this because of this. You're not giving a reason. You're just,
and that's kind of, kind of why I see, a lot of, like, really, really heavy faith-based lifestyle. Like, I kind of see it as irrational like that, because, like, well, why do you believe that? Oh, because I do. Like, because that's what I believe.
Well, here's where we're getting to, and this is kind of the point of this line of questioning, is that from an atheistic worldview, what you are left with is going to be an arbitrary reason for why things are right or wrong.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to say, I don't know, it just is.
Yeah.
And what I'm saying is that from that perspective, there is not an explanation. It's actually an unreasonable way to approach the question.
So I guess, I'll kind of give you a little counter to that. Like, why then, if you come from, a very faith-based life, why would you just take something just because, God said, or because the Bible said? Like,
right.
Why?
Great question.
Why would you then take that at face value? Mm-hmm. It's like kind of that same...
Yeah, so here's the reasoning behind it, is that this is kind of an ultimate argument, okay, in the sense of it is overarching over everything. Okay. That's what I mean, is that it's like over everything.
Yeah.
Okay, and we just talked about one aspect, morality. But the basics is this, is that if you reject, so basically we have this Bible, right? We all have access to it. You can look at it. Of course, just because the Bible claims it's the Word of God, which it does claim that, doesn't necessarily make it so. Because there are other things that claim that as well.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is if you're analyzing the Bible as whether this is the Word of God, which is a really important question,
it is.
If you reject it as the Word of God, then you're actually left with no foundation for, we can talk about a few more things, but for example, one of them being morality, is that you're left in complete arbitrariness when it comes to ethics. Mm-hmm. So then you're left actually in an arbitrary or irrational approach to morality. Mm-hmm. But if you take the Bible, if you assume it, so if you assume to reject it, you're left with arbitrariness, but if you assume to accept it, you're actually left with a rational basis for why there's universal moral absolutes. Because the answer is actually rather simple if you're taking the Bible for what it says it is. You probably know the answer. It's fairly simple, is that God created people. And then he has this universal moral law expressed in the Ten Commandments, but he also puts it in people's consciences. Yeah. And that it does give a reasonable explanation for these things. And if you reject that, then you're left with arbitrariness.
Yeah.
So I'm saying.
That makes sense. And it definitely does. Like, I can definitely see how that would be, like, I see that, I can see that as a rational line of reasoning, and I definitely do. I guess a place where I don't see it as arbitrary is, and you can definitely take every single one of the things back to, like, well, where did they learn it from? Like, you take people who've studied, ethics and morals, and, like, and obviously, like, I put, like, I don't know, a couple of years in and just actually thinking about it and trying to figure it out. But, you've got, like, scholars and researchers who actually, like, study the human condition and, like, you know, the human psyche and just kind of why humans operate the way that they do. And like to that degree, like I put my, like that's where I kind of find my rationality go. Is I think it's all very, what's the word? I think humans are all driven by something. Like, they're all driving themselves towards a goal. It doesn't really matter what it is. But I think there is a reason for pretty much everything that people do. And so I guess where I think it's rational is, you know, we've researched it, we've studied humans, we've observed our behavior, and like just what we find from that is like that's where it feels rational to me. Is like I actually like I definitely like I have this evidence, I have solid explanations of why people are the way they are. And obviously like I don't have my philosophy textbook here with me today. So I couldn't tell you names, but you know, I can definitely see both sides of it.
Yeah, because all I'm saying is that I know that we can study, you know, different people groups have different different moral standards.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like you said, some people may have kind of a ridiculous standard that you can't wear jeans or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay. But, you know, so everybody in different regions may have and different families will even have different moral standards, and they're going to derive that from one place or another, right?
Right.
That's really, I mean, that's true. I agree with that, but that's not really the foundational question that I'm asking.
So foundation-wise,
is that why? Like I said, for an example, why is it wrong, immoral? Why does it matter if I just killed somebody? Now, see, from my worldview, there's obviously an obvious reason.
Yeah, very obvious.
Yeah.
And, you know, I can, like, okay, so, like, for my worldview, if someone says, why is it wrong to kill someone?
Yeah, yeah.
So this is where I have a very unpopular opinion. I do think there's always times where, like, I think it's probably okay to kill someone sometimes. Like, if someone is, like, hurting another person.
Yeah, I think there's times. I agree.
People agree, and it's one of those things like, well, why do people agree? That's okay, but
let's talk about, like, murder, though.
Yeah, like murder. Like just cold-blooded, come up and shoot me in the face.
Exactly.
That
murder. True murder, not self-defense, not anything like that.
Like, there's times when, you know, there's definitely, every time, there's something forgivable in every situation. But, I don't know, I believe, just at a purely physical level, I think, you know, every person, you know, kind of is doing something with their life. And I think that just every individual, just on a basic level, there's just, like, so much complexity to a human being. And then just, I do think human life is valuable. And I think that I don't think another person just has the right to take that just out of the blue like that. I think that's also one of the things. And you have to also, like, question, like, well, what right do they have over another person's life? And it's kind of hard because it's one of those things where you can literally take any argument and take it back to that very basic, you know, argument of, well, why is it the way it is? Yeah. And it's kind of difficult to work around it then because I don't have an answer.
Right.
And so, like, that's an issue where it's an area where I have, you know, where I take issue with religion and, you know, faith-based lifestyle is people just take, you know, they just take all of it. And I understand that, you know, it's either, you can't really do, like, you can't just halfway do it.
Right, yeah, for sure.
You really can't.
That's inconsistent.
Yeah, like, and it's just contradictory to both things that you're doing halfway. So, like, it's either all or nothing.
Absolutely.
And so, like, for me, like, I personally, like, it's not compelling enough to say, it's almost ridiculous to believe, you know, that there's this high superpower person, not our presence, doesn't have to be a person, that, you know, completely, like, bestowed all of their knowledge into these people and they compiled it into a book. And, like, it's that same aspect of, like, well, these people were scholars and they studied it too. You know, people can hold that rationale and that example, but it's kind of, I don't know.
Well, see, again, this comes back to our worldview lenses, right? So what you and I think is kind of absurd or ridiculous
are two very different.
Right, but it also depends entirely upon our worldview lens, right? Because you, from a more of an atheistic worldview, is going to say, well, that's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
But see, just if you step into my worldview for a second and just kind of pretend you're part of it, it actually is not illogical. It actually makes
definitely not.
It actually makes sense because if you have an almighty God really not a problem with him giving a Bible, is there?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Like, and I definitely, like, you know, it's very possible to be empathetic and to kind of try and see things from someone else's point of view. And it's difficult for me, obviously, because I do have a very firm belief in what I hold to be true.
Right.
But I definitely do understand, you know, and I've had, you know, dear friends who've been very, very faithful. And I definitely understand that, like, it does, like, I can definitely understand how it would be a reasonable thing.
Right. So we're really back to the main kind of argument, like logical argument, is that we're really assessing which worldview lens is actually rational with reality, right? So we're talking about morality as one example of an issue, and I'm saying from an atheistic worldview, you're going to be left with an arbitrary reason for why you do anything that you consider right or wrong. So if you ever express like moral anger towards something, like, that's a horrible thing that person did.
Yeah.
Well, that's saying there's something wrong. But my point is that you can't really say why.
Yeah.
There's not a reason.
That's fair.
Right.
And it definitely is.
Yeah.
To that extent, though, I think, you know, I think it's fair to say, though, that, like, especially, you know, people who may have a similar worldview as me, and it's not saying that we're immoral people.
No, I'm not saying
not by any means. I know that's not what you're saying, but, like, I know there's plenty of people who, you know, definitely believe that just because, like, it's kind of, like, seen as a different way of living. And I think the morality thing, like, for me, it's, obviously it could be different for every person, but I think it just kind of comes from the fact that, I think at the end of the day, humans are very self-motivated and self-interested. And I think it's just kind of like a basic, why, like, do what you would want done to you.
Right. So that's kind of, remember what I said earlier about worldviews and that they have to be, like, self-sufficient.
They do.
And they can't borrow from other worldviews. Right. So that what you just expressed, do unto others as you have them do unto you, is from my worldview.
Yeah,
from
and
the
it
Bible.
is.
It's from the book of Matthew. Jesus said that. So I'm saying, what basis do you have? Not appealing to Jesus or
Yeah, and
the
I don't
Bible.
have one. Like,
Right.
I can easily just say, like, I don't have,
Yeah.
like, a foundation that comes from. Like, that's just, like, what I get told from a little kid, like, treat people the way you want to be treated.
Right. No, and I know that, I see that you agree with that, which is a good thing. It's a moral standard, but I'm saying the moral standard as a foundation really comes from my worldview.
Yeah.
Yeah, because...
Well, and so here's the other interesting thing is kind of, and it is inconsistent. I recognize that kind of the way that I pull different aspects of my life, I kind of, like, I like to pull, and it's sucky. I kind of pull the best things from the things that I think are good, because, like, it's really hard. Like, I already know, like, I would have a difficult time committing 100% of myself to something with the background that I have. And so, like, I think, you know, there's lots of different religions that have very, very valuable aspects to human life, like Christianity has a ton, like, they're all very good, and, like, I guess by that rationale, like, I totally, like, I recognize I probably have an irrational worldview in comparison to yours, like, it completely is.
Yeah.
But
I appreciate talking to you. You have good humility about you to actually reason with me, and you're a good thinker, like I said. I mean that sincerely. But what you just said is really, really important.
Yeah.
It's really important, because what we're talking about here is if a worldview is irrational, it means you really shouldn't believe it.
Yeah. And so I guess that's kind of how I feel about, you know, just religion in total, like in like all broad aspects. Like, it definitely seems like something that you don't have any other reason to believe that other than the fact that God said it. And then that to me is irrational.
Well, what I'm saying is, to be clear about what my argument actually is that I'm saying the Bible must be true due to the impossibility of the contrary, meaning that the Bible must be true because if you reject it, then nothing is possible, nothing is rational, because you have no basis for... We only talk about one thing, so morality, for example. I'm saying, so it has to be true based upon the impossibility of it not being true. Okay. That's why I meant that it's an overarching argument for everything.
No, it definitely is.
But it's because, you know, you admitted, and I appreciate that from your worldview, you know things are wrong, but you really don't know why they're wrong, or you can't really say why you'd express moral anger at, you know, like the Nazis or something, even though I think we both agree that was a horrendous murderous act. But see, from my worldview, it's obviously why God said you should not murder, and therefore they violated the moral code, the moral standard of God. But from your worldview, you know it's wrong, but you're not sure why. You can't really give a reason why. That's what I mean by it's arbitrary.
The foundation, yeah.
Yeah, from your
and
perspective.
I do get that, and I obviously I can't give you an answer.
Yeah.
Obviously, because I don't know. I don't have an answer for that. Just the foundation, just because it's kind of just that different. It's just like humans are gonna do what they do,
Right.
and you can always take it back to that.
Right. So I'm saying the only rational answer that can be given. I'm not just because I'm not arguing for religion in general. I'm arguing for Christian, Bible, Christian worldview. Is that the only rational answer that can be given is if you take the Bible as what it says it is.
Mm-hmm.
But if you reject that and you're left with arbitrariness, if you accept it, you have a rational reason for this one example for this universal absolute morality that we agree
That's
upon.
fair.
So I'm saying is that it actually is rational, from objectively rational, while the atheistic worldview is left with arbitrariness when it comes
That's
to
fair.
morality. So let's talk about one other aspect. Another thing we need to have as a foundation that's consistent with reality, and we can call it the uniformity of nature, or the fact that nature functions under laws and is uniform. And we live that way, don't we? And we assume that with everything that we do. Because even something as mundane as, when you squeeze a tube of toothpaste before you brush your teeth, what you expect to happen is you open it up, you squeeze it, and you expect toothpaste to come out.
Yeah.
That's assuming nature will be uniform.
Yeah.
Okay. So, if I were to ask you, why is it that when you squeeze that tube of toothpaste tonight, you expect toothpaste to come out? Why do you expect toothpaste to come out?
Because it's happened every other time.
Right. And that's the answer that I think everybody would give.
And then you have to... I can see where you're going with this. Keep going.
If you do, I'd be very impressed in your intelligence, for real, because this is something that most people don't think about, but if you have, that's awesome. So, in terms of arguing from the past to the future, like that, saying, well, it's always happened in the past, it's actually a logical fallacy called begging the question.
Yeah.
You know this? Wow, okay. So, because if you argue from the past to the future, give me a parallel argument. If I told you, Maddie, I'll never die, you say, that's weird.
Well, it's not happened yet.
It has happened in the past. Yeah, in my experience, I've never died, so I'm never going to die in the future. See how it's a fallacy? It's a faulty argument. So to argue from the past to the future is actually a fallacy. I know everybody's going to say that, but they shouldn't.
No.
And the fact is that even people from an atheistic world, have you ever heard of Bertrand Russell?
Yeah.
Yeah, he actually admitted this in his book Problems in Philosophy. He said, we can't argue that way.
No.
We can't do that. It's a fallacy. So I'm saying is that in order to provide a rational foundation for the uniformity of nature, you can't commit that fallacy of arguing from the past to the future.
That's fair.
You actually have to appeal to, again, my worldview. Because my worldview, in the Bible, God talks about how he puts uniformity in nature. Okay, so we can have a surety that, things are going to remain the same. I know this table's going to be a table from one second to the next. And really, I can't even give you enough examples because it's literally everything that we experience physically. We expect it to remain uniform as we walk across the path. We expect it to remain a path. Expect our car to remain the car. When we turn it, we expect things to do with everything. We expect physics to remain the same, gravity to remain the same, all these things to remain the same. But to say, well, it's always been that way in the past, it's a fallacious way of arguing. So I'm saying if you reject Scripture, you're going to left with an arbitrary and a fallacious way of reasoning when it comes to this basic foundational thing.
No, I get that.
Yeah, so this is really a big one.
That
really
is
big
a good one. One I haven't put much thought into, I'll be honest.
Well, no, most people don't. It's
most
a pretty,
people don't.
Yeah.
And when you said that, I was like, damn it, I know where you're going with this. But
I'm impressed, really I am, because most people are like, what are you talking about?
I'm a philosophy minor, dude.
Well, that's very good.
It helps.
Yeah, so Bertrand Russell and all that. So.
No, but I guess by that rationale, it's kind of... that's an easy one to go to, is, well, it's happened in the past.
Right. But the reason I can
completely... it is.
Yeah.
You should not use that.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, I'm not gonna, I can't think of a good example. Obviously, it's like, oh, well, I'm not going to die, ever.
Yeah,
that's a great one, honestly.
Yeah.
But to that degree, it's just kind of cause and effect to me. And it's, if you squeeze the toothpaste and it doesn't come out, you can troubleshoot. You can be like, okay, well, why did this not happen? Like, there could be something blocking it. There could be something else,
Right, but
changing it. But, you can fix it.
Right. But disregarding all potential
disregarding
obstacles.
all the obstacles.
Just like a normal, it's a full tube, it's
just
open.
Fresh open, you just break the seal.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just, yeah, that's a good one. I don't really have much to say about it other than I think I can think about it in a very physical way, where if you think about the physics behind it, like, it makes a lot of sense. Like, open tube, apply pressure.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Projection.
But the question is why the laws of physics remain.
Why the laws of physics are there
and
in the first place.
We can assume they'll remain that way in the future.
And remain constant.
Yeah.
That's a good question.
Yeah. And I'm saying is even I don't know if you've really read Bertrand Russell, but of course, intelligent guy, no doubt. But he recognized this as a big problem.
It is.
It is a big problem from an atheistic perspective.
No, it definitely is, and like I recognize, like, I can recognize that right now, that like that's probably like a shortcoming. Right now, where I'm sitting, I'm like, oh, you know what? That is a good question. Because it is hard not to just be like, well, that's the way it's always been.
Right. So again, my point is that again, if you reject Scripture as God's word, then you're left with an irrational approach to the world, or an irrational worldview. When it comes to going through these two: morality, big question. Can we function with moral standards every single day?
Right.
And then also uniformity of nature. We can't take a second without assuming uniformity of nature.
Right.
We are, because I'm assuming everything, so much going on around us, and we assume it will remain uniform. But without the Christian worldview, there's actually no rational basis to assume that.
Right.
But because you're going to beg the question.
Yeah.
so that's kind of my point. So again, my argument is in these two areas is that the Bible is true because it's impossible for it not to be true, because there'd be no other rational foundation for it.
Okay.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question too. We'll these are good things to think about. And since you're a philosophy person, this is what it's all about.
It is.
You know?
No, and it is thinking about these things, and it's.
Yeah.
I've told people, like, and I actually really like. You walked up and I was like, oh, this person's gonna talk to me.
No, I understand.
But I really enjoy having conversations like this, and it's actually very rare that someone will actually have like an open conversation, because
it is.
More often than not, I tell like people like, oh, I want to talk to you about God. I'm like, okay, and they're like, do you believe in it? And I'm like, oh, not really, and it's just attack.
Right.
More often than not. So it's actually very refreshing to have a very nice conversation about it. So thank you.
No, like I said, I really genuinely, this is nice.
No, it is. And I don't think, I think a lot of people get confused. Like, that's like the way that if you want to educate someone and inform someone, first they have to be open to actually hear what you have to say. For sure. And two, like, you actually have to conversate. You can't just attack. So.
Right, yeah. And that's why, I wanted to, because I know a lot of people think, well, if you're a Christian, it's a blind faith. But I'm saying it's not blind faith, it's actually a reasonable faith. Because I'm saying if you reject it, you actually have no reason.
That's fair.
It's actually kind of the opposite.
See, and so here's probably a little piece from my worldview is very, very just like cynical. Okay. It's like I don't really like, as valuable as I think humans are, I don't think we have a lot of value to the earth. And I think, that at the end of the day, like, if like I just like walked out and like just died, that'd be cool. Like, not much, like, you'd probably be like, oh God, like, kind of traumatized if I just walked over and died. But, like, I don't know, I think, like, to me, like, the world would just go on. Like, it does, and it just goes on. And, like, it's one of those things that it's hard not to take it back to that big overarching question, like, well, why? Yeah. But, I've always told people, I'm like, well, I don't really believe in religion or faith. They said, but unless I can get some good, like, I won't until I get some good evidence. And, it's, I kind of believe myself to be, connected and spiritual in the sense that, like, not, like, religiously spiritual, but, like, just, I feel very connected to, like, myself and others. And so, like, in that sense, like, I think that's kind of a valuable thing, but, other than that, it's still kind of, what's funny is after all that, like, I definitely do understand your point a lot, but I still, like, I'm still very stuck in mine. Like, I do, and people are stubborn. Oh, yeah. And I also recognize that I am. But it's still, it's, I shouldn't say can't. I currently don't believe just taking things at faith.
Hey guys, thank you for listening to part 1 of this conversation with an atheist. Stay tuned for part 2 of Evangelism Encounters, where we continue this conversation. Thanks for listening.